K98 Talk is expanding its lineup for 2015. This means we are expanding our advertising base. Whether you're a startup trying to push through to the next level or an established business trying to supplement your advertising budget, web-based advertising is a solid investment. Thanks to Talk's newest partnership with TuneIn Radio and instant access to our sister station, K98 FM, we give you worldwide access at a reasonable cost. Interested parties should email us at sales@k98fm.com. Turn up the sound and rip off the knobs. You're listening to K98Talk.com, the leader in Internet radio.
We will keep this promise to the American people. If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor, period. If you like your health care plan, you will be able to keep your health care plan, period.
This is the most transparent administration in history. Not even a smidgen of corruption.
Fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. What difference at this point does it make?
If you got a business, you didn't build that.
Oh, welcome to the face. Welcome to the face of the new democracy. Don't expect us to admit a mistake. We're paying off election debts to those on the take. Attorney General's lying even while
It's time to hear the truth about America's biggest challenges. You're listening to America Off the Rails with your host, Rick Robinson.
All right, folks, this is Rick Robinson. I'm the host of America Off the Rails. It is Monday, June the 8th, 2015. This is actually a pre-recorded episode. For those of you who are listening on AMF247.com, this is actually the one that was sent over there. So for you, it'll be about 1 Eastern. Those of you listening now on our home station, K98 Talk, it'll be about 7 Eastern your time. Now, I don't do this very often. I actually very rarely ever pre-record an episode, but I thought this was important. At the time of recording this, I just finished an episode of Bloody Marys and Broadsheets where I had the honor of sitting in with Miss Stacey Lennox. Unfortunately, JD was under the weather, but it did bring something to my attention that I might have not known enough about had I not had the chance to sit in. And that is the whole Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement that is being snaked in through D.C. And yes, I said snaked in for a reason. Folks, I'll let Stephani explain it more, and you'll get her bio as Stacey goes into the interview. Now, I have to admit, I don't say much here, but honestly, it's because I'm stunned, because I had no idea that some of this stuff was going on. But you're going to get the interview in its entirety, and then I will probably say something there towards the end as well. But it's just crazy, the things that are going on in D.C. right now. And I do interject from time to time, but yeah, it's important enough that I thought it was necessary to get the word out, which is why it's going out to every affiliate we have access to. Because time is short, the vote is near, and we need to do something about this, or ultimately we're going to be giving away our own sovereignty. Without further ado, here's the interview between Stacey Lennox and Stephani Scruggs. She gives out more information during the show, so if you want to find a way to help, make sure you do that. Again, this is Rick Robinson. I'm the host of America Off the Rails. I'll be back with you when the interview concludes.
And as promised, we have Stephani Scruggs on the line. Stephani is the co-chair of the Congressional Education Committee for Coalition for a Strong America. If you want to check out Stephani and a whole host of great conservative voices and ideas and information, you can go to coalitionforastrongamerica.com. Prior to working for this organization, Stephani was the national co-chair for Glenn Beck's 912 Project, and please welcome her to the show to talk to us about what's actually going on up in Capitol Hill with this whole TPA thing, Steph. We actually reviewed your primer and some other press on it on our show on Thursday, and one of the most interesting things to me is when I'm reading what the TPA actually entails, I can't find a conservative case for it anywhere. So if you espouse conservative principles, how could you support the complete abdication of constitutional responsibilities by Congress?
You really can't. And thanks for having me on. Happy Sunday, everybody. But you're right, you really can't. Unfortunately, there's like this knee-jerk reaction where, when some Republicans hear free trade, they're like, oh, I'm all for free trade. I got to do this. The problem is they're forgetting that they're letting Barack Obama tell us this is free trade. And I don't trust his definition of whether the sky's blue or not, let alone what free trade might be. And so it's a knee-jerk reaction by Congress, and we're doing our best to educate them as to what's wrong with this whole little plan of giving Congress's power, not only to the president, but ultimately over to international tribunals and world courts.
Can you explain that concept just a little bit more in terms of how that works within the TPA or within the total context of the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership? Because I'm not sure people really understand how much American sovereignty could potentially go away if this legislation passes.
Oh, it's stunning. So first of all, what you need to know is that fast-track TPA is this bill before Congress where Congress gives their power to negotiate international trade agreements and treaties to the president. Now, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the United States Constitution says that Congress has that power to conduct international trade negotiations. Paul Ryan apparently didn't read that part because he's busy running around trying to convince everyone that the only way Congress can have power is by giving away their power to the president. So that's, Paul's a little lost. So that's what Fast Track does. And what Fast Track is meant to do is it's meant to slam dunk the passage of a massive trade agreement known as the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement that covers the eastern side of the world, and the Transatlantic Trade Agreement, which covers the western side of the world. So for all intents and purposes, these are blanket agreements that cover each half of the world. And realistically, because they're docking agreements, any country can join on to them at a later time. They're really the last two trade agreements of all time. And we're letting Barack Obama negotiate them all by his wee lonesome if Paul Ryan gets his way. That should terrify everyone, okay? So what happens in these, though, what's really detrimental in these bills is not only is Congress giving away their power to the president, they are also giving away their power to object to any of the rules and regulations that the president imposes after the trade agreement has been signed, right? So when you sign a trade agreement, there's all this implementing legislation and regulations that come with it, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if they pass Fast Track, they don't get to object to that implementing regulations whatsoever. They don't get to amend any of the legislation. They just have to do it. And if they do not, if they do not approve all of the laws that Barack Obama lays down, then it's not Barack Obama enforcing them. It becomes world court tribunals enforcing them instead, because we signed a treaty in advance saying we'd change all these things. So what happens is you get WTO tribunals, big world courts, telling the United States, yeah, you got to change your laws. And we just recently saw this happening with a cool ruling, country of origin ruling. The World Court just, I guess it's been 3 weeks ago now, came down and told the United States, hey, guess what? You can't do country of origin labeling anymore to any of the NAFTA partners, Canada, Mexico, whatever. This is why you see commercials from like Sonic, for instance, now don't say 100% American beef or our beef is raised in Wyoming. No, those commercials now have to say 100% North American beef because the WTO ordered us to change our laws and our advertising accordingly.
So, and I know, and that's disturbing for me personally because I actually, especially with food products, shop country of origin for any number of reasons. The agricultural practices in Mexico are not that wonderful. And some of what they do to their produce and other things like rinsing grapes in bleach and such. So, I mean, I don't buy grapes from Mexico and I don't buy certain things out of season in the U.S. or Canada because of those things, and we won't know anymore.
And, the really devastating thing is, as bad as Mexico is, these countries that are covered by the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement are all third world countries. It'd be polite to call them emerging economies. Many of them are just pre-emerging economies, and they have almost zero food safety standards. Yet, what the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement does is it says as long as another country has a written set of food rules that's good enough for their own citizens, we have to accept them here if we sign this trade agreement, right? So in the case of Vietnamese catfish, when inspected, it has been found that 80 to 90% of it is contaminated with worms, rodent feces, hair, DDT, and mercury, and then they dump antibiotics over it to keep it alive long enough to ship it to the United States. And the antibiotic levels are far above what we would have, right? Here's what's really terrifying and why it's good to read food labels now. The USDA and the FDA only hands-on inspects 3% of the food imports that come into this country. So just because you're seeing a catfish from Vietnam, also known as swai, by the way, on your food shelves doesn't mean it's been inspected. And we already know from past inspection failures, 80 to 90% of it is bad, right? So, but if we move forward with TPP, not only will the USDA and the FDA not be allowed to reject this contaminated food, it also won't have any country of origin labeling on it. So now not only can the feds not protect me from poisoned meat, I can't protect myself by choosing American-grown catfish instead of poisoned Vietnamese catfish.
Ugh. And that's just one example of things that would impact us as citizens of the United States with a certain set of standards in terms of this very global trade agreement. Now, I did read an open letter from Senator Sessions to Barack Obama.
Senator Sessions has to be my favorite senator on the Hill right now.
Very, very critical of the secrecy with which this whole process is going down. I mean, I thought it was a joke when they said they were keeping this thing in a locked basement room. It's not.
Nope. It's not.
They're
it's
actually
terrifying.
being escorted down to read it.
Not just escorted, they're searched before entering the room. No kidding. They cannot bring in their phones. They cannot bring in any cameras, anything but which could be used to make a copy of the document. No recording devices, so they couldn't even take a voice recording of it. If they bring staff, their staff has to have high-level classified security clearances, and the same applies to them. They can take notes while they're in the room. However, they have to leave those notes there, and they're searched upon exiting as well. No kidding. These are our congressmen and senators. And as Mr. Sessions has been threatened with, if they talk to anybody, the press, even their own staffers, if they talk to their own staffers who do not have classified clearance, they can be facing 5 years in prison. In fact, that threat has been leveled against Pete Sessions for the amount of talking he's been doing about what's in the TPP. And God bless him, his attitude is kind of like, bring it. I'm a U.S. Senator. I've got a job to do to serve the people. You go ahead and prosecute me. I'm going to keep telling the people what kind of hijinks you're trying to pull here.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, the most transparent administration in history, right? I mean, on what planet is it okay for our senators and representatives not to be able to understand what the feelings of their constituents are about this? And how are we supposed to have feelings about it if we don't know what it is?
Exactly. You know, we met with another congressman, and this was equally stunning. This congressman had taken a junket to Japan and happened to mention to one of the Japanese diplomats, hey, how do you think the TPP negotiations are going? The diplomat told that congressman, I'm sorry, your president's USTR, your president's trade representatives have told me I am not allowed to discuss this with you or I'll be kicked out of the negotiations. Needless to say, the congressman's head about exploded. Again, I'm a U.S. congressman. And he's just been ordered not to talk to him about it. It's stunning. Now, keep in mind, because it gets hard to go back and forth between fast-track TPA and what's in the TPP. Fast-track TPA is meant to ensure that the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement gets slam-dunk passed, both in the Senate and the House. And that's how these things are related. Well, wait a minute. How can you decide whether to give something an easy pass if you don't know what's going to be in that something? And that's exactly what John Boehner and Paul Ryan and Barack Obama are asking Congress to do right now. Let's just give the authority to go ahead and pass this thing. We know you haven't read it. You don't really need to know what's in it. Just look the other way, pass fast track so we can pass Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement, this giant secret agreement. It's insane.
Well, and with that, there's, rumblings. If you take a look at what is purported or assumed, maybe is the right word, because there is so much secrecy about it. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, the actual agreement on trade, is a lot less about trade than it is about regulations around things like labor, wages, climate change, a whole host of items that are key to the Obama and progressive agenda.
You're absolutely right. The Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement is 29 chapters long. Only 4 of those chapters actually deal with trade issues. The other 25 chapters are all domestic policy changing, that's U.S. law and regulation changing policies. It's a regulatory agreement. It's not a free trade agreement. I'm all for free trade. This isn't free trade. It's a giant set of regulations to be imposed on us by the World Trade Organization and international bodies.
Well, and when you look at the unleashing of executive agencies under the Obama administration to begin with, just to go back to what you said about TPA itself, that would mean regulations put out by the executive branch that fall under the executive agencies, Congress would have no right to object to. They couldn't say, no, we're not going to do that. So you have the EPA, who currently put out regulations governing puddles, seriously, and has done all kinds of other things, including taking money from people for suspected violations, never proving the violation. You're going to have agencies like the IRS who targeted conservative groups unabashedly. So these executive agencies who've already proved they will act in a partisan way and will punish those who dissent are going to be given even more power to write regulation aligned with this.
You're absolutely right. And Congress, because it's already signed off on the trade agreement, no future Congress will have the power to change those regulations or laws that were changed as part of the implementing legislation and implementing regulations that come down from the president after it's signed.
Rick, what questions do you have for Stephani?
I've kind of just been enthralled listening to you two. I'm just being honest. I've tried to keep up with this, and I thought I was doing a pretty good job, but there are things in here that I had no idea were going on, like the whole congressmen being escorted to a locked room in the basement to even go over it. And not much of a question, but more of an observation. I kind of get the impression this whole TPP thing is kind of a way to get us backdoored into this one world government that it seems like everybody seems like they're trying to push for, because we're basically abdicating all of our rights and responsibilities once this thing goes into effect, and it just seems crazy that anybody would want to do that. But that's just
You're absolutely right. And I've been accused of being some kind of conspiracist, for proposing such a thing. But here's the reality. WikiLeaks has actually leaked 3 chapters of the TPP. I never thought I'd be happy that Julian Assange lives in the world, but I am, because I've actually read more of the TPP than most of Congress. And one thing you find in here, and then also in the non-classified summaries that the United States Trade Representative Office has posted, you keep seeing this one word all through the document, which is the word harmonize. We are going to harmonize U.S. practices to match international practices. We seek to harmonize U.S. law to match international law. What that means, harmonize, is such a pretty word. We think of happy people singing. What harmonize actually means in this context is that the U.S. will be changing laws and regulations to match what an international body says is appropriate. This absolutely guts our Constitution, and it throws any chance at sovereignty we ever had of retaining right out the window. It's gone if we sign these types of trade agreements.
Well, Stephani, it's just about time for us to go into a quick break. Would you be willing to hang out for just a few more questions?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. And we will be right back.
All right, folks, this is Rick Robinson. You're listening to America Off the Rails. We'll be right back to continue the interview between Stephani Scruggs, Stacey Lennox, and myself right here on K98 Talk. Don't go anywhere.
Turn up the sound and rip off the knobs. You're listening to K98Talk.com, the leader in Internet radio.
Are you conservative in a world of liberal?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're not alone. Hey, I'm Daniel Stafford, host of the Stafford Voice, and I'd like to invite you to tune in each Monday, 10 p.m. Eastern, where I'll break down the events of the week, and together we'll learn about how they affect you. So, sit back and get ready for the good, the bad, and the ugly of talk radio right here on K98 Talk.
Our military service members volunteer to protect us in the most dangerous places around the world. They step up. And when they are severely ill or injured, returning to their families is only the beginning of their long road home. Beyond all the hospitals and doctors and surgeries they need just to survive, they also deserve whatever they need to truly live. All the in-home care and day-to-day help they need to live independently, on their own terms. Wounded Warrior Project long-term support programs were established to provide these brave men and women whatever they need to continue their fight for independence, at no cost, for life. So many of them need us, and it's time for a grateful nation to step up. Find out how you can do your part at findwwp.org.
For our own cause, we got a pen and telephone to bypass all your laws. Political correctness will replace the Bill of Rights. Support religious freedom, lest you pray to Jesus Christ. The press is in our pockets.
Welcome back, folks. This is America Off the Rails. I'm your host, Rick Robinson. Now, without further ado, back to the interview between myself, Stephani Scruggs, and Stacey Lennox, right here on America Off the Rails.
And welcome back to Bloody Marys and Broadsheets, your easy Sunday morning. This is Stacey, and with me today is Rick Robinson, station manager for K98, and we're just going to finish up our discussion here with Stephani Scruggs from Coalition for Free America. Strong America. God, Strong America. Let me fix that. Coalition for StrongAmerica.com. Please go to her website. That would be the correct one. Anyway, during the break, Stephani, we were talking about one element of the Trans-Pacific Partnership that is even more disturbing given kind of what's going on in the courts now, and that's immigration.
That's right. So the interesting thing about this, Chairman Paul Ryan, chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, along with Senator Ted Cruz, released an op-ed about a month ago, trying basically to undo any of the progress that we've done in reaching Republicans on this. And one of the things that Paul Ryan says and Ted Cruz say in this document is that there's no way that the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement can change our immigration laws, right? And but here's the thing. They're playing with words here. TPP does lead to backdoor amnesty, and here's how. What it does is, while it doesn't necessarily right now change our immigration laws, it forces us to open our doors to hundreds of thousands, and actually when you add up the numbers, it's actually millions, of, quote, guest worker visas, right, which is foreigners who come here to take jobs. Right? And this is mandated. Once we sign this, it'll be mandated by the WTO. Now, here's what we found, and here's how we know these people will stay. Under the South Korean trade agreement, 400,000, quote, guest worker visas were issued. 80% of those guest workers stayed past their visa and are now illegal aliens stuck here in the country. Okay? So what happens is South Korea, and this is just in the last few years. So South Korea is also a member of the TPP. There are 10 other countries besides. When we take those numbers and multiply them out, just by the 11 nations, and go with the lowest possible number, we're looking at approximately 4 million guest worker visas being issued, so 4 million foreigners coming to America. And if 80% of those stay just like they did in South Korea, because, hey, who wants to go back to a third world country when you can stay here in good old America, we can expect approximately 3.2 to 3.6 million of those guest workers overstaying their visas and becoming illegal aliens. 3.6 million new illegal aliens coming to stay here in this country and reap the benefits of our tax system. In other words, take our tax money to subsidize their lifestyle. This creates a situation where there are so many more illegals in the country, and it helps push the entire amnesty meme. Well, we've got to do something for these people. Oh, and by the way, should they have children here, then their children are actually naturally born citizens, aren't they? They're automatically granted citizenship. So again, leading to the backdoor amnesty charge. Well, we've got to do something with these people. We got to have a heart. We can't send them back to that horrible third world country. We need to let them stay right here. And then we need to give them rights and driver's license and voting
Obamacare
records
and food stamps. And I'm sorry.
Don't forget the phone. They have to have the phone. Don't forget the phone.
And the phone. Yeah, no. Actually, one of the other guests we've had on, Michael Loftus, who does the Flipside Comedy Show, does a great piece on immigration that if it weren't so sad, it would be absolutely hysterical. But I mean, you have to laugh because of the way he phrases it. But when you look at the incentives for people to come here, they're nearly ridiculous. So I actually have no problems with open immigration if you fix entitlements first. But we're not going to do that in the current environment at all.
No. And there's a national security element here as well, because the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement is a docking agreement, which means that any country can dock onto it in the future without the United States approval. All it takes is 2/3 of the other trading partners to agree to let somebody in, right? So already the Sultanate of Brunei, which is a country that is officially ruled by Sharia law, is one of the trading partners. Now, what happens after we sign this agreement and 2/3 of our trading partners decide Iran should be a trading partner? We not only won't be able to say no, we won't be able to get out of this agreement. And oh, by the way, we'd have to issue those guest worker visas to the Iranian people that the government of Iran wants to send here to America. That sounds like a brilliant idea. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, brilliant. But I mean, it's not just that. It completely strips the United Nations and the United States of America the ability in such cases where we see gross human rights violations and other things to impose economic sanctions from a diplomacy standpoint.
You're absolutely right. And all Iran or Cuba, for that matter, would have to do to get around those sanctions is to apply to be a partner in one of these agreements and get the other 2/3 of countries to agree with them. China will be on the list. We all know that. It's not China containment by any stretch of the imagination. This administration, various members of it have invited China to join, and China has said they may have. But you bring up human rights, too. 8 of the 11 trading partners are on the State Department's bad guy list of human rights abuses. We saw last summer the Thai shrimp boats that were manned almost entirely by slave labor. A number of these countries are known perpetrators of the sex slave. It is not uncommon for 8 and 10-year-old little girls to be kidnapped from their homes in Singapore and sold to whorehouses and brothels. Are these the people we want to reward with our money and with our buying power? This is the largest consumer market in the entire world, right here in America. So if we're actually going to do good in the world, we ought to use that as our ultimate trading card to say, you want into our markets? You want to sell here and reap the benefits of having your products sold on Walmart shelves? Then you need to come up to par. You need to raise up your food safety standards so that you're not poisoning our people. You need to raise up your toy standards. Hello, Chinese. So you're not putting lead paint on our kids' toys. And oh, yeah, you need to quit selling little girls to whorehouses. Just an idea.
Just a small idea. And maybe in some other parts of the world, you need to stop jailing journalists and beheading people who don't have the same religion as you,
Just to backtrack for a second, if I might, she brought up an interesting point about the China containment, because Grouchy recently at the Southern Republican Leadership Conference actually had a chance to interview Ambassador John Bolton, and he mentioned that the TPP actually was started under the Bush administration. It was intended for that purpose. It was supposed to be able to bring the rest of the world to the level of China as far as their trade agreements and everything else. But this goes back to something that I've said I don't know how many times. Just because you're okay with the side that you support having this type of power, what's going to happen when it's the other side's turn? And we're kind of seeing a glaring, blatant example of that now. So it's crazy.
Well, you're absolutely right, but there's a little more to that, So one thing that China did is just this last October, China formed the AIIB Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Their initial deposits, their starting deposit from China was $1 trillion. That is more than double the other three world banks combined. That's the IMF, the World Bank, and the Asian Development Bank. So China has more than double what they have combined, right? Meanwhile, China has been getting all these different countries to sign up. They have 56 countries signed on now, which includes all but one of the TPP participating nations and almost all of our European allies, right? So there's this old saying that I've always found to be true, which is he who holds the money makes the rules, right? Just like in the Bible it says the borrower is slave to the lender. It's true. So China's got $1 trillion and 56 partners now. They're going to write the rules on this. This is not containment. We're looking at a little tiny, for in comparison's sake, trade agreement with 11 partners who, by the way, are already partnered with China under the AIIB Bank, and we think this is going to control them. Furthermore, this administration, Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State said it, John Kerry as Secretary of State said it, and Barack Obama just a few nights ago said it. China has repeatedly been invited to join TPP, and just a few nights ago, China indicated they probably will. So tell me again, Paul Ryan and everybody else who's pushing this meme, how is TPP China containment? That horse done left the barn already when they founded the AIIB. They've got all the money, they've got all the trading partners, and we're not even putting things into TPP that would amount to containment. One of the biggest problems we have with China is currency manipulation. Currency manipulation from Asian countries, including China. And what that is, by the way, under IMF rules, currency manipulation is when a country goes into a foreign currency exchange and intervenes in it to make their dollar or yen or whatever seem smaller and make their goods cheaper. It's done as a predatory trade practice. And China's the worst at it, and eight of the TPP partners are also on the top 10 list of bad guys. Their combined efforts in conducting what amounts to a currency war against the United States has cost our GDP, according to the Peterson Institute, it has cost our GDP $800 million and 8 million jobs, right? So when we're looking at TPP, one smart thing they could have done if they really wanted to make this China containment was to put clauses in there to say that if you manipulate currency by conducting currency wars in foreign exchange markets, you will be punished, and here are the sanctions put against you. However, the administration has repeatedly insisted over and over again that they will not put that into the TPP no matter what Congress insists. Congress has tried to make sure this is in there. They won't do it, right? Well, if you're not going to address currency manipulation, which is the number one trade issue in the world right now, we can't reasonably call TPP free trade. So again, why are we doing TPP? If we know that they're not going to fix trade problems, if we know that the vast bulk of this has nothing to do with trade, why are we doing this? It is to impose international regulations on the United States and lock us into a lifetime-long treaty, a forever, never-ending treaty that we can't get out of, that harmonizes us to world standards, removes our sovereignty, kills our Constitution, and puts us under the control of world courts.
You know, this show is called Bloody Marys and Broadsheets, and we joke a lot about topping off our beverage, but after this conversation, I'm really tempted to actually do it.
What do you mean after this conversation? I started drinking about halfway through because otherwise I'm just going to start crying.
Well, my liquor's not in arm's reach and I can't get off the phone. So, I'm sitting here going and I guess my biggest thing, I kind of opened with it, is I find no conservative case for TPA regardless of who is in office. I wouldn't have cared if it was George Bush. I would not have cared. I don't care if it's Barack Obama. Point is, the executive, given our separation of powers, should never have this kind of power. Ever.
No, I'm likely to agree with you. Here's what, if the Founding Fathers actually knew what they were doing when they set up Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, giving Congress this power.
Hang on a second. Did you hear that loud explosion? That was a liberal's head somewhere that was listening to the show.
So the reason the Founding Fathers gave this power to Congress is two reasons. Number one, they foresaw a time where there might be an ideologue in the White House that really didn't give a damn what everybody else thought, right? Oh, gee, we have that now. But the other reason, too, is the Founding Fathers recognized that Congress would be largely populated by men and women who had real-world business experience and not only knew how certain trade policies would affect their own backyard, but how they would affect business in general. And you need those kind of experiences moving forward in any kind of business negotiation, particularly in international negotiation. The reason Japan keeps kicking our butts in these negotiations is because Japan's negotiators are not bureaucrats like ours. They are instead the vice presidents of Nippon Denso and Mitsubishi, guys who make billion-dollar deals every single day for a living. What do we have? We have Barack Obama and Michael Froman, two ideologues who've never seen a boardroom table in their entire life, but they're going to define free trade for us. And so far, it seems they've gotten it pretty doggone wrong.
Maybe we should send Carly Fiorina.
Absolutely. I want Carly Fiorina, Donald Trump, and Mark Cuban at the next round of negotiations with the Japanese and the TPP partners.
There you go. Well, Stephani, I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning. Talk to the folks about what they can do to help you in your cause and also where they can find you on social media.
Absolutely. Please go to coalitionforastrongamerica.com. We have a ton of information on Fast Track up there. We do actually do other issues as well, but the vote is happening likely this Thursday. And so we need you to go there, get educated, but also, and more importantly, call your congressman. Tell them to vote no. So you can do that by dialing 202-224-3121. Give the operator your zip code. They'll connect you to your congressman. If you get an answering machine, leave a message. That's okay, because they still count those. Otherwise, you can go to house.gov, and in the upper right-hand corner, there's a enter your zip code, find your representative. You can send an email or leave a voicemail message or speak to a human being if you're lucky that way too. But it is imperative that you please call your representatives this week. Call them as much as you can, as often as you can. Tell your friends to call them. That's what it's going to take to stop this. Stop Fast Track. That's all you need to tell them. Don't vote for it. Stop Fast Track. Thank you guys so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it, and thank you, listeners.
Stephani, before you go anywhere, I have a quick question. Do any of the organizations that you're involved in have any type of audio spots promoting how folks can fight this or how they can contact folks or anything like that? Because if you do, or even if you don't, we can actually probably work on getting something put together, and I would donate the airtime to run it here on pretty much every show we have. So.
Oh, my gosh, that would be fabulous. We don't have anything like that. You know, Michael Bowen, the other national co-chair, and I, we do this largely out of our own pockets. And so, that would be fantastic. You can also check us out on Facebook at Coalition for a Strong America on Facebook. And on Twitter, we're strong_America and the number 1. And you can follow us there as well.
All right. Okay. Well, I'd like to take a moment just to say, for JD specifically, who I know was looking forward to being here and unfortunately fell ill, it's been my pleasure being in on the interview. I know I didn't contribute too much, but that's because you guys were rocking it and I didn't want to mess anything up.
Well, and Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we'll get you the information about how you and Michael might be able to record a repeating ad for at least this week.
That would be fantastic. Thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
All right. Best of luck this week, Steph.
Thanks.
Bye. Wow. I had done some reading, and I certainly, if you haven't read Senator Sessions' open letter, it was posted in full on Breitbart. I strongly suggest you go read it. I mean, here is a senator who is standing up and saying, really, come get me. I'm going to keep talking about it because the American people deserve to know what's going on. And they have actually threatened him with legal action. I think Senator Sessions and folks like Stephanie and Mike with the Coalition for a Strong America really need our support. They're really on the front lines battling to maintain our sovereignty.
All right, folks. Well, that concludes the interview. I was going to ask you if you've enjoyed it, but honestly, that interview terrified me. So if you have any way to get involved or you know a way to help, you can reach out to these folks at coalitionforastrongamerica.com. That is their website. Feel free to look it up. Find a way to help. Do it now. We're running out of time.
A show that will change internet radio as you know it.
Okay, so let's talk about the story, which I think is hilarious. I'm just going to refer to it as the poop plane because, like, what else are you going to call it? But there was this plane, okay? It took off. It's the British Airways. They were going to Dubai. I have a hard time pronouncing that one.
It was British Airways? It wasn't Jet. It wasn't Jet Poo?
It wasn't.
Couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
I like it. This story, if we've ever had a story that is up our alley, it's this one. It's bathroom humor up from front to back of the airplane, apparently. They had to turn around to go back to Heathrow because they said the smelly poo in the toilet became unbearable for passengers, and it was so bad. They decided it's so bad that they had to turn around and go back rather than continue their flight. They decided that there wasn't enough Febreze, there wasn't enough anything to handle this.
Maybe they should see a doctor. Is there a GoFundMe for this guy?
It must be a woman, because a woman's going to be mortified and embarrassed. If this is a guy, you know that he's like out there on Twitter and everything else saying, dude, I took down an airplane with how bad that I laid it down.
There was an old woman who flew on jet poo. She ate so many burritos she didn't know what to do.
So we turned the plane around because they made a big stink. We've just made it into a haiku at the end, but there had to be something.
Real Serious Nonsense, Mondays, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, now on K98 Talk.
Not on my watch, our military service members say, as they volunteer to serve. Not on my watch, they say, as they leave their families behind to keep the rest of ours safe. As they move out, stand firm, and take fire. So not on our watch, we say, to the severely ill or injured veterans who can't get the care they deserve, the therapists they need to walk again, the treatment they need to talk again, the lifetime of day-to-day help they need to live full and independent lives. When there's no more government funding, or a nursing home seems like the only option, or everyone says there's no hope for recovery, we won't leave one warrior behind. Not on our watch. Find out how you can do your part at findwwp.org.
Calls, we got a pen and telephone to bypass all your laws. Political correctness will replace the Bill of Rights. Support religious freedom, lest you pray to Jesus Christ. The press is in our pockets.
All right, folks, we're back. This is America Off the Rails. I'm your host, Rick Robinson. Don't forget, coalitionforastrongamerica.com. Call your congressmen, call your senators. Let's stop this mess before it ever gets a chance to get started.
Welcome to the place.
All right, folks, as I said, we're back from the commercial break. Now, at this point, I was going to change gears and start talking about some of the stuff going on with Hillary, Rubio, some of the other stuff that Stacey and I talked about yesterday. But I can't do it. This is too important. I don't think anybody realizes what's going on in D.C. right now. They're making backdoor moves to give away our sovereignty. They want to take the checks and balances that were put into place by our founding fathers, the folks that built our country. And they want to take all of those checks and balances, they want to remove them and give all of the power to the executive branch. The issue is, the reason they want to give all of the power to the executive branch is because they're hoping that what happens next is the executive branch gives all of that power to this new world organization that they're trying to get started that nobody really knows anything about, nobody wants to talk about, nobody even wants to admit that it exists. But if you really start looking at what's going on with the TPP, you will fully understand that there are moves that are going on that nobody knows about, that nobody wants to talk about. Why else would the President of the United States and all of the officials involved in this TPP legislation restrict everyone to complete and total silence under penalty of jail time? Possible, for all I know, they probably have them signing off on something that tells them that, I don't know how else to say it. You just really have to stop and think for a second. What the hell is our government doing? Why is something like TPP even a necessity at this point? And why the hell are conservatives lining up to support it? Look, this is the thing that we all need to stop and think about. And I've said it before, and I'm going to continue to say it. This started under the Bush administration, much like the Patriot Act. And this is one of the reasons why I said, and I said it during the interview, if you're one of those people that's like, oh, I'm fine with this because my guy has all the power right now, what's going to happen when the other side gets a turn to use it? Because look, the TPP framework was started during the Bush administration. It may have been something that ideologically was started with the best of intentions, but it has been morphed into this total monster that is ultimately going to make you and me and everyone in America less free than we already are. We give away our freedoms every day without noticing. Please find a way to do something about this. Write your congressman, email your congressman, call them. I mean, at this point, writing them a letter won't do you much good. We're down to a few days from the vote, which is one of the reasons why this was imperative to me that we get the information out as quickly as possible, which is why we pre-recorded this particular episode, taking parts of another one that I had just done with Stacey Lennox, which is Bloody Marys and Broadsheets, which airs here on K98 Talk every Sunday morning at 11 Eastern. But this is the point. We are going to give away our sovereignty before we know what happened. Just like what Stephanie said earlier, he who controls the money makes the rules. At this point, if TPP moves forward with the moves that China has made behind the scenes, and if they're ever allowed to become part of the TPP, they already control more money than any of the other world banks involved in any of this. And it's just crazy that we are knowingly and willingly giving away our sovereignty. I know there are enough people that are paying attention to this that it should not be happening. The fact is, DC, on the flip side, though, there's still not enough people paying attention to it, which is why the Obama administration has sworn everybody to complete silence. Because imagine what would happen if the few congressmen and senators that knew anything about this bill were taking this information back to their constituents. What do you think would happen? Now the reason I make this statement is because this is what concerns me. We have Paul Ryan, someone who not too long ago was running to be the Vice President of the United States, that is supporting TPP under the guise of free trade. This has absolutely nothing to do with free trade. This is about world trade, not free trade. This is about, I've said it before and I'll say it again, after World War II, the Western world and a few other interested parties spent as much money as they could to try to bring the rest of the world up to first world standards. It didn't work. No matter how hard they tried, whatever moves they made, whoever they supported that was supposed to be able to help them bring about those changes eventually usually wound up turning against them and making changes they didn't agree with, and then we wound up fighting with them, but that's a topic for another show. But the point is, they gave up not too long ago with the idea of bringing the rest of the world to first world standards. Why do you think this type of stuff is happening? Why do you think they want open borders and immigration? Because, yeah, it's great. We have so many people that want to come here, because who the hell doesn't want to come here from a third world country where they barely have running water? And most of the time, if you drink the water, you get sick. I mean, don't even get me started about my one time I went to Mexico when I was a teenager and mistakenly drunk out of a water bottle that was marked Eureka. Didn't dawn on me that it probably wasn't Eureka water anymore, and I paid for it for about 4 days. So if that type of stuff is going on just to the south of us, imagine how bad it is in the rest of the world, where there really are third world country type places. So I understand the bleeding heart ideology of we need to get everybody here to America, but what we're not understanding, and what nobody's understanding, or maybe a few people are, and maybe that's the scariest part of all, is that if we let all of this happen, which, make no mistakes, TPP has backdoor amnesty as well. Stephanie talked about that during the interview. If we let this happen, what's going to wind up happening is eventually our economy is going to collapse. When it collapses, it will have collapsed by design. Once it collapses, the folks that have been working behind the scenes to make it collapse will be able to swoop in, pick up the pieces, and then before we know it, there will no longer be a national identity for the United States. There's already been an organization for the last 20 some odd years that has been working to create the North American Union in the guise of trying to combat the European Union, but ultimately it's because they know that since up until now, before we actually started declining, and make no mistake about it, folks, we are declining. We once had a AAA credit rating. We now have a AA credit rating. We had the strongest military in the world. We really don't have that anymore. We had the strongest economy in the world. It's limping along worse than I do. And for those of you who know me personally, yeah, you can laugh. It's okay. If you don't know me personally, feel free to laugh anyway, because just imagine a guy who pulls to the left anytime he moves. It's kind of comical. But anyway, so that being said, as the show comes to a close, we need to stop this, and we need to stop it now. This is the beginning of the end for the United States of America if we do not stop this now. Tinfoil hat, you want to call me the tinfoil hat wearer? You know what? I'll wear that badge with honor at this point, because I've been reading a little bit of this all along and didn't put together a lot of the pieces until we had this interview. So I don't know about you, but since I'm pre-recording this, I will be going to WikiLeaks here in just a minute to read up some more about TPP. Alright, folks, well, that's going to do it for this particular episode of America Off the Rails. Don't forget, stay tuned. Here at 7 o'clock, we will have probably a repeat of Liz Harrison, because as soon as this one goes dark, that will be the next show that comes up on the server. Actually, since this was pre-recorded, it may actually play again. Then, of course, we have at 8 o'clock, Real Serious Nonsense, hosted by Angie and Paul. And then we will have Daniel Stafford of the Stafford Voice from 9 to 10. These times are, of course, Central. I know most of the time I need to remember to get them over to Eastern. But, hey, it's been a long day. Put a lot of work in to get this put together. All right, folks. You have a great night. I will be back with you tomorrow night live and in person right here on our home station, K98 Talk. This is Rick Robinson. You have been listening to America Off the Rails with a special presentation of an interview that was done yesterday on Bloody Marys and Broadsheets, where I sat in for an ill JD. Sir, I do hope you are feeling better by now, and if not, we'll continue to pull for you. And it was my pleasure sitting in with you, Stacey. Hopefully we can do it again sometime. Alright, but at this point, folks, it is sadly time for us to say goodbye. You guys have a great night. I'm Rick Robinson. I'll be back with you tomorrow.
Both did everything you earned by breaking your backs. We're gonna redistribute when we make our pay tax. Hey, sit back down.
Screw you guys. I'm going home. Later.
Game over, man. It's game over.